A dagger went straight up into a man's back 6 times before he was even able to see the face of the person holding it. He was tied to a tree with the man using a nylon cord his own hands helped knot because the man standing over him said it was for their own protection. He said to them that there was an escaped convict nearby. Believe me, this guy said it so calmly that Bryan Hartnell believed him right up until the moment the hood came off and the knife came out. Well, he will live, but does he know that yet? Absolutely no. Right now there is only grass against his cheek and the low, faint voice of his girlfriend somewhere far behind him, and not forgetting the stranger putting on an executioner's hood, writing something on the door of his captive's car in white marker before walking away into the trees like he has a date with a beautiful lady that same night. Before you get angry, hear me out. This is not the genesis of this story. However, this is where it nearly ended for 2 people who had done nothing wrong that night except for going on a date near the lake. The man in the hood already had a name for himself by this point. He had already mailed it to 3 newspapers. He called himself the Zodiac, and by the time he was finished, he had already convinced an entire state that no front door, no parked car, no quiet afternoon was safe from a stranger who wanted nothing from his victims except the right to brag about how he murdered them later. How do you think a man like this was created? Let me take you back to the memory lane, 9 months earlier, to a road most people in Benicia, California had never thought it would give birth to a monster. Lake Herman Road, also known as the Lover's Lane. It's the kind of place a couple goes when they want to create lovely and sometimes intimate memories to cherish for lifetime. It all went down on the night after Christmas in 1968. 2 teenagers parked there. Unfortunately, they never made it home. There was no struggle, no warning. Whoever did it walked up to their car, opened fire at them, and walked away without taking a single thing. The police failed to crack the motive behind the murder. They filed it as a tragedy with no clear motive. This is the kind of case that goes cold within a season because there is nothing to chase. They had no way of knowing they had just met the opening line of a story that would take over the entire region for the next 6 years. However, for the following 7 months, everyone enjoyed peace and silence. It felt more like the killer's first stop was just a mistake instead of a pattern. Then he broke the peace treaty on the 4th of July at a parking area called Blue Rock Springs. He came back, same method, same lack of motive.
Except for this time, one of his victims survived, and he was able to describe him. Mike Mageau took bullets to the neck and the face and somehow miraculously stayed conscious long enough that he gave police the first real sketch the faceless killer had ever had. Heavy set, round face, curly brown hair. Don't get your hopes high yet. It was just a description that meant nothing yet, because there was no name to attach it to. But less than an hour later, a phone call came in. A man, calm as a weather reporter, told a police dispatcher exactly where to find the bodies. He then added something that should have made every hair on that dispatcher's neck stand up. He said, "I also killed the kids from the year before." With this information, it was now certain that Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs killings were not 2 separate tragedies anymore. They were one man's little beginnings, and he had just confirmed he intended to keep writing. Later on, after 3 weeks, an identical letter was sent to 3 newspapers across the Bay Area, opened. Each of the letters contained a part of the coded message and a demand stamped in plain English. Print this on your front page, or there will be more bodies by the weekend. Now this is the part of the Zodiac's documentary that no one has ever told you correctly. He was not just hunting people. He was hunting headlines. He was a psycho, yes, I agree, but he understood the psychology that most killers never bother to learn. That's how he knew that a newspaper editor faced with a credible threat against the public will choose the front page over the principal every single time. The Vallejo Times, the Chronicle, the Examiner, these guys all printed his cipher, because none of them wanted to be the outlet that gambled with someone else's life just to protect their own front page from a killer's name. This genius psycho had turned the entire press of Northern California into an unpaid accomplice, and he had done it with a letter and a threat that cost him nothing but a stamp.
I'm glad you've made it this far. You already know where this is heading, and it gets worse before it gets better. Subscribe now, because the next 20 minutes of this psycho's life are the part true crime channels almost never slow down enough to actually show you. The first cipher, which was the 408, was cracked in less than a week by a husband and wife working from their kitchen table with nothing but pencils and patience. Here is how a cipher like that actually breaks. Every letter of the alphabet appears in English with a known frequency. E shows up constantly, Z almost never. It was a cipher that was built from symbols instead of letters, so it can still be cracked by counting which symbols repeat the most and testing them against the letters they are statistically most likely to represent. That is exactly what the Hardens did, symbol by symbol, until a sentence climbed out of the noise, which was, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." He went further, comparing it to hunting, which is one of the most dangerous games on earth, which was, in his own words, man. Does he mean it makes him feel more like a man? Well, let's move on. A second, longer cipher arrived not long after. He swore this one contained his actual name.
However, it couldn't be solved for 51 years. Cryptographers from 3 different countries worked and worked and worked on it independently. Nothing came of it, before they finally came up with an idea of combining their methods in the year 2020 to crack it, using techniques that did not exist when he wrote it. Guess what it said? After half a century of waiting, I am sorry to disappoint you. It said almost nothing. No name, no confession, just the same voice from 1969, still bragging, still trying to get the last word. Okay, let's take a sharp turn back to the Genesis, to the lake, about Bryan Hartnell, who was stabbed 6 times but somehow managed to live. Then Cecilia Shepard, his girlfriend, I didn't tell you much about her, I'm sorry. She did not survive her wounds. The man in the hood wrote a message on a car door in black marker before he walked away that night. He listed the date and location of his previous attacks like a man updating a scoreboard. 1 month later, after the last incident, a cab driver in San Francisco named Paul Stine picked up a fare just before 10 at night. He received his payment with a bullet as it shot straight into his head. This faceless psycho did one thing. He tore a piece of Stine's blood-stained shirt and mailed it to a newspaper as proof, then walked calmly past 2 police officers who had just been radioed a description matching him exactly. But they let him pass. Could that be fear? It might be. The truth still remains that he was standing in front of the 2 men who had the highest chances of putting an end to his story, but they let him walk past them.
By the early 70s, a name had started making waves and was being speculated to be the serial killer. Who could that have been? His name is Arthur Leigh Allen, although it was a rumor and was not officially proved and convicted. However, there's evidence of Arthur telling an acquaintance years before any of this began that Zodiac would be a good name to use if he ever killed someone. That alone is a striking reason to suspect him. Then the police went on and searched his home and found a watch from a brand whose logo nearly matched the killer's symbol. He also matched the survivor descriptions. He had access to a typewriter consistent with the letters. But guess what happened next? He was never charged. DNA testing decades later on the envelopes came back inconclusive, neither clearing him nor confirming him. One more door that refused to swing fully open in either direction. However, I think he sensed he is close to being caught, then he stopped flooding the letters in the mid-70s. No farewell, no final cipher. He simply let the silence finish what the threats had started and let everyone else keep guessing. Here is the part worth sitting with after the credits roll. Because the story may not end where you think it does. The case is still open today, and in 2026, a cold case investigator claimed he had decoded one more hidden message inside the Zodiac's letters, one that did not point to a man in Northern California at all. It pointed backward, 23 years earlier, to a body found wrapped in 2 pieces in an empty Los Angeles lot, the Black Dahlia murder. If that connection is real, the Zodiac did not begin his story in 1968. He began it in 1947 and spent 2 decades hiding in plain sight before anyone thought to look for him there. Police have reportedly approached a family for DNA over this exact claim. Nobody has proven it yet, but if it holds up, everything you just watched is only half the story. We're taking that claim apart, suspect and all, in the next episode. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned.